My name is Eric Turner, and I'm a graphic designer at Goldline Marketing Solutions, a mid-sized agency located in a high-rise downtown. This story happened in October of last year, during a particularly hectic time at work. Our team was handling a major campaign for a client, and the pressure was on to deliver a flawless presentation. That week, deadlines were coming at us like a freight train, and I'd been logging extra hours to keep up. It's not unusual for me to stay late, but this particular night was different. The office felt off. Normally, there's a comforting hum, a mix of distant conversations, phones ringing, and keyboards clattering. But after 8 p.m., the noise faded and silence took over. The company occupies the 14th floor of a 20-story building. The open-plan office is modern and spacious, with glass partitions dividing workstations and a shared lounge area with a coffee machine that's seen better days. At night, the dimmed lights and the glow of computer screens give the place an eerie, almost hollow feeling. It was a Tuesday night, around 9:30 p.m., when the first odd thing happened. I was deep into editing a promotional video, headphones on, trying to block out the exhaustion creeping in. When I reached for my coffee mug, I noticed something odd. The blinds on one of the conference room windows were swaying gently. That wouldn't have been strange during the day when the air conditioning is blasting, but the system automatically shuts off after 7 p.m. There wasn't a draft or a breeze in sight. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe someone had bumped into them earlier, and they were just settling back into place. Still, it gnawed at me. I got up and walked to the conference room, trying to shake off the unease. As I stepped inside, I flipped the light switch. The room lit up, revealing the familiar long table, mismatched chairs, and whiteboard littered with half-erased brainstorming notes. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. "You're just tired, Eric," I muttered to myself, chuckling nervously. On my way back to my desk, I noticed something else. The supply closet door at the end of the hallway was ajar. It's a strict company rule to keep it closed at all times. Inside are things like printer paper, spare monitors, and a bunch of old, forgotten marketing materials. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to check it out. As I pushed the door open, a metallic squeak echoed through the empty office. The closet was dimly lit by a single overhead bulb flickering faintly. I scanned the shelves and saw nothing unusual at first. But then, on the far side of the room, I noticed a stack of boxes that had toppled over. It looked like someone had rummaged through them. My first thought was that maybe our IT guy, Mark, had been in here looking for equipment. But why wouldn't he clean up after himself? I crouched down and started restacking the boxes, curious about what might have caused the mess. The labels on the boxes were faded, but they contained old event banners and unused giveaways. As I worked, a faint sound reached my ears, a soft shuffle, like someone dragging their feet across carpet. I froze. The sound was faint, but it was there, just beyond the doorway. I held my breath, straining to hear more. Nothing. Slowly, I stood up and peered out of the closet. The hallway stretched out, empty and bathed in dim light from the overhead fixtures. The open-plan desks were visible in the distance, rows of monitors glowing faintly. It felt like I was being watched, though I couldn't see anyone. I shook my head and laughed nervously. Too many true crime podcasts, I thought. Still, I couldn't completely shake the feeling. I returned to my desk, determined to finish my work and get out of there as soon as possible. But as I sat back down, I realized that the unease I felt wasn't going away. If anything, it was growing stronger. That's when I decided to text Mark. "Hey, were you in the office earlier tonight?" A few minutes passed and I heard the familiar ding of his reply. "Nope, left around 6. "Why?" I stared at the screen, debating whether to tell him about the closet or the strange sounds. Instead, I typed back something casual. Just curious. Thought I saw someone digging through the supplies. Probably nothing. Mark's reply came quicker this time. You're there alone? Yeah. Lock the front door. People are weird. That last message sent a shiver down my spine. Mark was right. People are weird. But was that all this was? Some harmless oddity? Or was there something else going on? For the first time that night, I seriously considered packing up and leaving. I should have listened to that instinct. Despite my growing unease, I decided to stay. I told myself I'd finish the promotional video and leave by 10:30 at the latest. The work wasn't exactly flowing, though. Every little sound made me glance over my shoulder. The ticking of the office clock, the hum of the refrigerator in the lounge, even the occasional crack of the building settling, everything seemed amplified in the silence. Around 10 p.m. I heard it again, that faint shuffling sound. This time it was closer, coming from the direction of the kitchen area near the break room. My stomach tightened. I pulled off my headphones and sat still, listening intently. The sound stopped. I told myself it must have been the refrigerator acting up. Still, I couldn't shake the sensation that someone else was there. I decided to check. Grabbing my phone, I turned on the flashlight and made my way toward the kitchen. The beam of light cut through the dimness, revealing nothing unusual at first. The counters were clean, the coffee machine idle, and the fridge door shut tight. I was about to head back to my desk when I noticed something strange. One of the mugs on the counter was filled with coffee. I hadn't made it. In fact, I hadn't seen anyone else in the office since 7 p.m. My coworkers didn't drink coffee this late, especially not black coffee. My pulse quickened as I stared at the steaming mug. The heat rising from it was unmistakable. Someone had made it recently. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing faintly. No response. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. It could have been someone from another floor, I reasoned. Maybe one of the cleaning staff stopped by? But I hadn't seen or heard the elevator ding. And why would they make coffee and leave it? I decided to check the front door. If someone had come in, the glass entry door should still be unlocked. As I approached, I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The door was still locked. Whoever made the coffee was still inside. My hand trembled as I double-checked the lock. Secure. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. I glanced down the hallway, toward the desks and conference rooms. The shadows seemed deeper now, the office more oppressive. That's when I heard it. A faint creak coming from the far end of the office. It sounded like a chair being pushed back from a desk. My blood ran cold. Someone was definitely here. The rational part of my brain told me to leave, to grab my bag, lock up, and take the elevator down to the safety of the well-lit lobby. But something rooted me to the spot. Call it curiosity, call it fear, but I found myself creeping toward the source of the sound instead. As I moved down the hallway, every step felt deliberate, my shoes barely making a sound on the carpet. The open-plan layout meant that whoever, or whatever, was making the noise would be visible once I rounded the corner. My phone's flashlight barely pierced the shadows ahead, but I kept it pointed forward, my hand trembling slightly. When I reached the corner, I stopped and pressed myself against the wall. I listened. The faint creak came again, followed by a low, almost imperceptible rustling sound. My breathing was shallow as I slowly leaned around the corner, my heart hammering in my chest. The desks were empty. Monitors glowed faintly, their screensavers dancing across the darkness. At the far end of the office, near one of the larger workstations, a chair was slightly turned away from the desk, as if someone had just gotten up, but no one was there. I shone the flashlight around the area, the beam catching on piles of papers, stacks of folders, and the faint glint of a water bottle left behind. I was about to turn back when something caught my eye. On the desk closest to the turned chair was an ID badge. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't one I recognized. I stepped closer, picking it up carefully. The name on the badge read, Daniel Reed, with a photo of a man I didn't recognize. His face was nondescript, average build, dark hair, neutral expression. Beneath his name was a title, Security Consultant. I frowned. We didn't have any security consultants working for Goldline, at least not that I'd ever heard of. As I turned the badge over in my hands, a sudden noise shattered the silence, the unmistakable sound of a door slamming shut. My head snapped up, and I instinctively dropped the badge back onto the desk. The sound had come from the direction of the conference rooms. Adrenaline surged through me as I spun around, my flashlight sweeping the room. "Hello?" I called out again, louder this time. My voice cracked slightly, betraying the fear I was trying to suppress. No answer. My instinct screamed at me to leave, but some part of me needed to know what was going on. Against my better judgment, I started walking toward the conference rooms. The air felt heavier with every step, the oppressive silence broken only by the faint hum of the building's electrical systems. When I reached the first door, I hesitated before slowly pushing it open. The room was empty, just as I'd left it earlier. The blinds were still, the whiteboard untouched. I checked the next room and found the same, no sign of anyone. But when I approached the third room, the door was already slightly open, a sliver of light spilling out into the hallway. I paused, my hand hovering over the doorknob. My pulse was racing, every fiber of my being screaming at me to turn around and leave. But I couldn't. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The room was empty, but the chair at the head of the table was slowly spinning, as if someone had just stood up and walked away. I stood frozen in the doorway, my breath catching in my throat. The chair continued its slow, eerie spin before coming to a stop. The room was silent, but the air felt charged, as if something, or someone, was waiting. My flashlight beam trembled as I scanned the room again, desperate to find an explanation. There was nothing, just an empty table, the spinning chair, and the faint hum of the building's electrical systems. Then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and coming from the hallway I had just walked through. My stomach dropped as I realized the sound was getting closer. Whoever had slammed the door and spun the chair was now walking toward me. Panic surged through me. I backed into the room, my eyes darting around for a place to hide. The conference table offered little cover, and the glass walls of the room made me feel exposed. The footsteps grew louder, more distinct, echoing off the walls. I pressed myself against the far wall, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would give me away. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. I held my breath, straining to hear any sign of movement. Seconds stretched into eternity as I waited, my phone flashlight clutched tightly in my hand. Then, the door creaked open. A shadow fell across the floor, long and distorted by the hallway light. I couldn't take it anymore. Without thinking, I bolted. I darted past the shadow and into the hallway, not daring to look back. My shoes pounded against the carpet as I sprinted toward the main office area. Behind me, I heard the sound of hurried footsteps giving chase. I didn't stop. My mind raced as I tried to think of a plan. The front door was still locked, and the elevator would take too long. That left the emergency stairwell. I veered toward it, my lungs burning as I pushed myself to move faster. The footsteps behind me were relentless, closing the distance with every second. Reaching the stairwell door, I slammed into it and shoved it open. The heavy metal door swung shut behind me with a loud clang as I started down the stairs 2 at a time. The echo of my own footsteps reverberated through the narrow space. masking the sound of my pursuer. I didn't dare look back. As I descended, a chilling thought crossed my mind. What if they had locked the stairwell doors from the outside? My panic grew, but I forced myself to focus on getting to the ground floor. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting unsettling shadows on the concrete walls. I could feel my energy waning, but the adrenaline kept me moving. Finally, I reached the lobby level. I burst through the stairwell door and into the brightly lit lobby. It was empty, the usual security guard nowhere in sight. I didn't stop to question it. I ran straight for the glass front doors, fumbling with my keys to unlock them. My hands shook so badly it took me 3 tries before I managed to get the key into the lock. Just as I turned the key and pushed the door open, I heard the stairwell door slam behind me. I didn't look back. I sprinted out into the cool night air, my lungs heaving as I ran toward my car parked a few feet away. Once inside, I locked the doors and started the engine, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The building loomed behind me, dark and silent, but the faint outline of a figure stood in the glass lobby, watching me drive away. I didn't stop driving until I was halfway across town. Even then, my heart refused to settle. Every time I glanced in the mirror, I half expected to see headlights trailing me, or that shadowy figure from the lobby standing in the distance. I didn't feel safe until I parked in front of my apartment and bolted the door behind me. Only then did I let myself collapse onto the couch, my mind racing to make sense of what had happened. Who was that man? And what was he doing in my office? The logical part of me wanted to write it off as a misunderstanding. Maybe he really was a security consultant, or someone hired by management without my knowledge. But the way he'd moved, the way he'd chased me, it didn't feel like the actions of someone with legitimate business. The ID badge I'd found kept replaying in my mind. Daniel Reed. I pulled out my laptop and searched the name, hoping for some kind of clue. What I found only deepened the mystery. There were dozens of results for people named Daniel Reed, but none that matched the man I'd seen. No LinkedIn profiles, no local connections, nothing that tied him to Goldline Marketing Solutions. I debated calling the police, but what would I even tell them? That a strange man had chased me out of my office, that I'd found an ID badge but had no proof he'd done anything wrong. Without evidence, it felt pointless. Besides, part of me was terrified of what I might uncover if I dug too deep. The next morning, I called in sick. I couldn't face going back to the office, not after what had happened. When I finally worked up the courage to text Mark and ask if he'd heard anything unusual, his reply was brief. Not that I know of. Everything seemed normal when I came in this morning. Normal. The word felt like a slap in the face. Nothing about last night had been normal. But I didn't press him. Instead, I spent the rest of the day locked in my apartment, jumping at every creak and shadow, replaying the events in my mind. By the time evening rolled around, I'd convinced myself to let it go. Maybe it had been a prank, or some kind of test by management. Either way, I wasn't going back to the office alone anytime soon. But just as I was beginning to feel a semblance of calm, a notification lit up my phone. It was an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line sent a chill down my spine. "We need to talk." I stared at the subject line on my phone. "We need to talk." The sender's email address was just a random string of numbers and letters, nothing that gave any clue as to who they were. My finger hovered over the screen, hesitant to open it. Every instinct told me to delete the email, to put my phone down and pretend I hadn't seen it. But curiosity got the better of me. The email opened to a single line of text. "You're not safe." My blood ran cold. I read the message over and over, hoping I'd misread it or that it was some kind of prank. But no, the words were there, clear and undeniable. I checked the timestamp. It had been sent just moments ago. Before I could process what to do, another email came in from the same address. This one had an attachment. The subject line read, "Proof." My hands trembled as I clicked on it, my breath catching in my throat. The attachment was a photo. It was dark and grainy, clearly taken in low light, but I recognized the scene immediately. It was my office. The photo had been taken from behind the glass wall of the conference room, looking out at the hallway. And there I was, in the frame, walking past with my phone in hand, oblivious to the camera capturing me. Panic surged through me as I realized what this meant. Whoever had sent the email had been in the office with me that night. They'd been watching me, following me, and I hadn't noticed a thing. And I hadn't. I grabbed my phone and called the police, my voice shaking as I tried to explain the situation. They said they'd send someone to take a report, but the operator's tone made it clear they weren't treating this as an emergency. After hanging up, I locked every door and window in my apartment, double-checking them twice. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The hours crawled by as I sat in my living room, clutching a baseball bat I'd found in my closet. Every noise outside my door made me jump. Every shadow seemed to shift and move. I barely slept, and when morning finally came, it brought little relief. The police arrived around 8 a.m. 2 officers listened to my story, nodding politely but clearly skeptical. They examined the emails and the photo, but there wasn't much they could do. The sender's email address was untraceable, and without any tangible evidence of a crime, their hands were tied. They suggested I stay somewhere else for a few days, and left me with a case number and a promise to follow up. I called Mark later that day to let him know I wouldn't be coming in for the rest of the week. He seemed concerned but didn't press for details. Part of me wanted to tell him everything, to warn him about what had happened, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. What if it put him in danger too? Over the next few days, I stayed with a friend, avoiding my apartment and the office entirely. The emails stopped, and for a while, I thought maybe it was over. But deep down, I knew better. Whoever had been in the office that night hadn't just been messing with me. They'd been sending a message. A week later, I returned to my apartment. Everything seemed normal at first. The locks were intact. Nothing was out of place. But as I stepped into the living room, I noticed something on the coffee table. A single sheet of paper, folded neatly in half. My hands shook as I picked it up and unfolded it. Written in bold black letters were 3 words: "Don't come back." If you like these stories, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell to listen to new stories from Mr. Fear every day. Thank you for watching.